The Force is old and full of shadows.
The planet has no name in any Republic database. That is by design. It sits at the edge of the Outer Rim's outer edge, past the last charted shipping lane, past the last beacon buoy, in a region of space so electromagnetically hostile that most nav computers refuse the jump coordinates entirely. The star it orbits is dim, and red, and dying. The kind of star that stopped caring about the systems it owned 1 billion years ago. The planet below it is all iron-gray rock and ancient wind, a world that was already old when the Republic was young, that was already old when the Sith were young, that was already old when the Rakata built their empire from the bones of lesser civilizations and called themselves infinite. The vault is underground. 3 kilometers down, past collapsed tunnels and sealed blast doors, whose locking mechanisms predate the hyperdrive by 4,000 years. Past warning glyphs carved in a language that has no living speakers. Past traps that are not mechanical, that are, in fact, patient. The vault is a sarcophagus, and inside it, something stirs. It is not a clean awakening. Consciousness returns the way a tide returns, not all at once, but in increments, each wave dragging more wreckage up the shore. First comes sensation, the cold of durasteel against bone, the weight of a body that has not moved in years beyond counting. Then comes sound. Not sound, exactly, but the memory of sound, the ghost of it, a battle cry in a language he spoke before he spoke anything else. Then comes the Force. It hits him like a blow to the chest. He has been sealed away from it for so long that its return is not comfort. It is assault. Every living thing on the planet above, every microorganism in the rock around him, every slow nuclear thought of the dying star overhead floods through his reopened perception simultaneously. He cannot sort it. He cannot categorize it. For a span of seconds that feels geological, he is not a man. He is simply a point of awareness inside an ocean that has no horizon. He finds himself the way he always has. By deciding to. His name is Revan. That is enough. Everything else can wait. The stasis field collapses in sections, the outer containment first, then the secondary field, then the final layer closest to his body, which dissolves like frost in morning light. The sarcophagus hisses. The seals he placed himself, 4,000 years ago by the reckoning of a calendar that no longer exists, release with a precision that surprises even him. The engineering held. Of course it held. He built it. He sits up. The motion costs him more than it should. His body is intact. The stasis preserved it perfectly. A small mercy. But the mind's instructions to the flesh come through static, like a signal bounced off too many relay stations. His hands shake. He observes this the way he observes everything, without judgment, filing it as a data point. The trembling will pass. The weakness is temporary. He has been weak before, and it has never been permanent. The chamber is exactly as he left it. Dark, dry, cold. The glyphs on the walls glow faintly in old Rakatan script. Maintenance readouts, environmental logs, the vault's quiet record of the centuries it spent standing vigil over a secret nobody alive knew to look for. He reads them automatically. The habit of comprehension is older than the weakness in his hands. 4,012 years. He sits with that number for a moment, not with grief, not with awe, with the careful attention he gives any piece of tactical information, which is what it is, a variable, a constraint. The galaxy outside this vault has had 4,000 years to change, to grow, to collapse, to grow again. The Republic he left behind, whatever it has become, has had 4,000 years to make new mistakes, and perfect old ones. He will need to know what kind of galaxy he is walking back into. He reaches into the Force. The technique is one he refined in the years before the stasis, not a vision, not a battle meditation, but something quieter than either. A listening. He opens his awareness outward, past the rock and the vault and the electromagnetic hostility of the atmosphere above, past the dead planet's thin exosphere, and reaches toward the closest currents of living force signature that drift through the galaxy's deep channels like a river finding its own grade. What he finds there stops him. Not because it is unfamiliar, because it is too familiar. There is a war. That much he could have predicted. There is always a war. Somewhere, and his experience of galactic civilization is that peace is the exception, and conflict is the baseline. But this war has a specific texture. It has the weight of manufactured certainty, the feel of a conflict that believes in itself too completely. That has no doubt at its edges because someone has very carefully removed doubt from the architecture. He has felt this before. He built wars like this himself once, and he recognizes the engineering. Someone is running both sides. He sits with this realization for longer than the trembling in his hands. He pulls at the force current carefully, following the thread, looking for the source, looking for the center of gravity that a deception this large would require. There is a dark side presence at the heart of the Republic so thoroughly concealed that it reads as an absence rather than a signature. Not a wound in the Force. A scar, long healed over, invisible until you know exactly where to press. Old, patient, afraid, that last quality clarifies everything. Revan opens his eyes. He conquered a galaxy with an army that believed in him. Whoever is sitting at the center of this manufactured war has conquered nothing. They are waiting for a galaxy to conquer itself, and dressing the waiting up as genius. He knows the type. He has contempt for the type. The trembling in his hands stops. He finds his equipment where he left it. Not because he trusted 4,000 years of structural stability, but because he built redundancy into every anchor point, every storage seal, every power cell in the chamber. The armor goes on in the correct order, the muscle memory intact even after 4 millennia. And when he settles the mask over his face, the familiar narrowing of his field of vision feels less like restriction and more like focus. Like the galaxy clarifying down to what matters. His lightsaber hilts, both of them, one for each hand, charged to full in under a minute from the vault's still functional power core. He tests the blades in the darkness of the chamber. Purple-white, and then deep violet. The sound of them is the same as it always was, clean, even, without the aggressive crackle that poorly tuned crystals produce. He deactivates them. The way out of the vault takes 20 minutes of careful navigation through corridors that have partially collapsed and traps that are still, patiently, active. He disarms each one by hand rather than with the Force, a discipline exercise and a useful recalibration of fine motor control. By the time he reaches the surface and stands in the dead planet's thin wind with the red star throwing long shadows across the iron-gray rock, the trembling is entirely gone. He looks up. His ship is still in orbit. Another redundancy, a maintenance intelligence he coded himself, running on a power system designed to outlast the civilization that built the technology it ran on. He reaches out with a specific force signal and watches the running lights answer from 60,000 kilometers overhead. The shuttle descends. He does not watch the vault entrance as he leaves. He does not look back at the warning glyphs or the collapsed tunnels or the 4,000-year-old engineering that kept him safe and silent while an entire galaxy forgot he existed. He is already thinking forward, already building the first layer of the plan, and the hidden layer behind it, and the contingency behind that. The shuttle settles on the rock beside him. The ramp lowers. He boards without ceremony. The coordinates for Coruscant are already in the nav computer. He entered them 4,000 years ago, in the last seconds before the stasis field sealed him in. Because he knew he would need them first, regardless of what he woke up to. Some variables are permanent. Power without accountability. Fear dressed as order. He had planned for the possibility of that too. The ship rises through the dead planet's upper atmosphere, and the red star falls away beneath him, and Revan sits in the pilot's chair in the silence of deep space, and begins, methodically, to learn everything the HoloNet can tell him about the war he just woke up inside. He will need all of it. He does not plan to be patient. Coruscant from orbit looks like a fever dream of civilization. Every centimeter of the surface burning with light, the planet's original geography buried so completely under 300 levels of city that the concept of ground has become theoretical. From 60,000 kilometers out, it reads as a single organism, a hive with 1 trillion beating hearts, all of them burning fuel and generating waste heat, and sending electromagnetic signals in every direction at once. The HoloNet traffic alone creates a detectable interference field, visible on standard sensors, from 3 planetary diameters away. Revan sits at the nav console and watches it grow in the forward viewport and thinks, this is what 4,000 years of uninterrupted Republic looks like. Fragile, he decides, not in its infrastructure, in its certainty. He does not land at a public docking bay. The landing coordinates he chose 3 days ago, during the long hyperspace transit, while the HoloNet fed him everything it knew. Battle reports, Senate session transcripts, casualty figures, economic analyses, the long public record of a war now in its 3rd year, are for a maintenance platform on level 1313, deep enough in the Undercity that the platform's registry hasn't been updated in 40 years, and its ownership traces through 6 defunct shell companies to a dead man whose name means nothing to the current Republic. Bureaucracy. He built that registry himself, in anticipation, before the stasis. Another redundancy. Another layer. The ship settles into darkness without a single logged entry in any active traffic system. He sits for a moment after the engines cycle down. The force here is dense and pressurized in a way that open space never is. 1 trillion lives packed into vertical kilometers. All of them feeling things simultaneously. All of that feeling bleeding into the force current, like heat off durasteel in direct sun. It takes active discipline not to simply hear it as noise. He filters it down to signal. This, too, is a recalibration. He rises from the pilot's chair and descends the ramp into the dark. The Jedi Temple is 300 levels above him and half a continent to the north, and he has been watching it for 6 hours. Not physically. He does not stand outside it with macro binoculars and time the guard rotations, though he could and the information would be useful. He watches it through the Force, the specific, concentrated practice of extending battle meditation awareness into a bounded area and listening for the patterns underneath the patterns. The temple has a force signature unlike any structure he has encountered in any era. Thousands of trained sensitives living and practicing in one location for generations, their collective presence soaked into the stone and durasteel of the building, the way moisture soaks into wood. It hums. It is, in the force, recognizable from extraordinary distance. What he is looking for, specifically, is not the hum. It is what moves through the hum. The individual signatures that the temple's collective presence almost, but not quite, conceals. He finds the young man within the first hour. Not a boy, strictly, a young man, perhaps 22 or 23 by the lines of him in the Force, but with a Force signature so outsized relative to his physical age that the word young sits wrong on him the way an undersized garment sits wrong on a frame it was not built for. The signature is not just large. It is pressurized, a reservoir behind a wall, the wall straining. Revan has felt Force sensitives of exceptional power before. He has been one. He knows the specific texture of a gift that its owner has never been given permission to fully use, and this young man's entire presence in the Force tastes of it. He also finds the darkness. This is what he did not expect, and Revan notes his own surprise as the data point it is, not dismissing it, not alarmed by it, simply filing it. The darkness is not in the temple. It is in a separate district entirely, resident in a building that the HoloNet's public records identify as the Republic Executive Complex, across the city from the temple's plateau, its distance irrelevant against the scale of what the concealment achieves. A presence that should be detectable at any range to thousands of trained Jedi is instead detectable to none of them, because it has been made undetectable, a concealment technique of extraordinary refinement, built not in a single deliberate moment but layered over decades, each new layer so thin that adding it created no event, no ripple, nothing to notice. The accumulated result is what reads as absence rather than presence. A scar instead of a wound. He probes it carefully, from a distance with the lightest possible touch, the way a medic probes tissue around an injury rather than the injury itself. The concealment does not respond, does not flex toward him or flinch away. It simply sits in the Force like a stone sits at the bottom of a clear pool, held in place by its own weight, indifferent to the current around it. Ancient, practiced cold in the specific way that patience without compassion goes cold. Revan withdraws his awareness and sits in the darkness of level 1313 and understands, with complete clarity, that the most dangerous being on this planet is not a battle commander or a military architect or a Sith Lord conducting some campaign of conquest. He is a bureaucrat. He sits in an office. He has meetings. The contempt arrives cleanly and he sets it aside. Contempt is a feeling, and feelings are data, not commands. He does not act on it. He acts on the plan. The temple's lower service entrance on the eastern face is the one he has chosen because its monitoring system runs on a node separate from the main temple grid. Maintained by a contracted droid service company rather than the temple's own technical staff, which means its update cycles run on a commercial schedule rather than a Jedi security protocol. He identified the gap in the transit data 3 days ago. The gap lasts 11 minutes. He enters it with 4 minutes to spare. Inside, the temple is quieter than he expected, and louder than any silence has a right to be. The force here is not the pressurized hum of the exterior reading. It is something more specific. The resonance of an institution that has been doing the same thing in the same place for so long that the doing has become the place. He walks through corridors of stone that remember 10,000 years of Jedi footsteps, and he does not let himself feel anything in particular about that. Because feeling things about it is not useful right now, and he will have time for it later, or he will not, and either outcome is acceptable. He finds the young man's quarters by following his force signature inward. He knocks. The door opens on a face that is handsome and tired and suspicious, in the specific way of someone who has learned that surprises are rarely good. The young man is taller than the force impression suggested, broad through the shoulders, with a mechanical right hand that he holds slightly away from his body the way people hold injuries they've stopped noticing. His eyes find Revan's mask first, then the armor, then something in the force presence behind both, and the suspicion shifts into something more complicated. "You're not supposed to be in here," Anakin Skywalker said. "No," Revan agreed. "I'm not." The answer seemed to confuse him more than a denial would have. He did not reach for his lightsaber. Revan noted this as a point in his favor. The instinct to assess before acting, buried under the exhaustion and the suspicion, but present. "Who are you?" Revan considered the question the way he considered most questions, for what it was actually asking beneath what it appeared to be asking. The young man did not want a name. He wanted a category. He wanted to know which kind of problem he was looking at so he could select the appropriate response. "Someone who arrived this morning," Revan said, "and has already found what your order has spent 3 years not finding." The tired eyes sharpened. The mechanical hand tightened slightly at his side. "That's not an answer." "It will be," Revan said, "if you let me in." The silence between them stretched across the threshold of the doorway. Revan did not fill it. He had built plans that required decades of patience. He could withstand 11 seconds of a young man making a decision. Anakin Skywalker stepped back from the door. Revan entered. The door closed behind him, and somewhere across the city, half a continent away, in an office in the Republic Executive Complex, a presence in the Force that had sat cold and still and patient for 40 years shifted, not toward alarm, not yet, but toward something adjacent to it. Something that felt, for the first time in decades, like attention. The room is small by any measure that matters. A Jedi Knight's quarters, functional, spare, the kind of space designed to remind its occupant that comfort is not the point. A sleeping pallet. A small desk with a deactivated datapad on it. A window that looks out over the endless vertical sprawl of Coruscant's upper levels, the city burning white and gold in the late afternoon light. On the desk beside the datapad, half hidden under a folded robe, a holographic emitter with a single saved image on it, a woman, dark-haired, dark-eyed, her expression caught between amusement and something more serious. Revan does not look at the holograph directly. He files it. Anakin Skywalker stands in the center of his own quarters with his arms crossed and his jaw set, and the posture says, "I let you in," which does not mean I trust you, which does not mean this conversation goes any direction you choose. Revan respects this. He sits without being invited to. "Tell me what you found," Anakin said, not a request. Tell me what you already suspect. Revan replied. We'll save time. The jaw tightened. The mechanical hand resting against his left forearm now, flexed once. I don't know who you are or what you want. You don't get to redirect. I get to do whatever moves us toward the truth fastest, Revan said. That's not arrogance. It's efficiency. You can be offended by it when there's time. He let that sit for exactly 2 seconds. There isn't time. There is a Sith Lord sitting inside the executive complex of your republic, and he has been there for longer than you have been alive. And your order has not found him because he designed your order's blind spots personally. So, what do you suspect? The silence that followed was a different kind than the one in the doorway. That silence had been a decision being made. This one was something being admitted to. Anakin unfolded his arms. He sat on the edge of the sleeping pallet and put his elbows on his knees and looked at the floor, and the exhaustion in him settled visibly, the way weight settles when a man stops performing uprightness and simply lets gravity do what gravity does. Palpatine, he said, quietly, as though the word cost something. Yes, Revan said. I've felt something. Anakin's eyes came up. Not clearly. Not. I couldn't name it. I told myself it was my own darkness reflecting back at me, because that's what the council would say if I brought it to them. They'd make it about me. A pause. Is it him? It is him. Another silence. This one was grief, briefly, before it became something harder. How long have you known? 6 hours, Revan said. I arrived this morning. The explanation takes 40 minutes, and Revan gives it the way he gives everything. In order, without sentiment, each piece placed where it creates the most structural clarity. He explains the force concealment technique and how he identified it. He explains what a presence that cold and that patient feels like in the force, and why it reads as absence to anyone not specifically looking for it. He explains what the war looks like from outside it, from the perspective of someone who has seen manufactured conflicts before, who knows the specific texture of a battle designed to produce no winner. Anakin listens without interrupting, which is harder for him than it looks. Revan can see the effort in the set of his shoulders, the contained energy of a man who wants to move, to act, to do something with his hands. He is, at his core, not a patient creature. This is not a flaw. Patience without energy is just waiting. The energy needs direction. The clone army, Anakin said when Revan finished. You're telling me the clones are compromised. Every one of them. A dormant command, coded into their inhibitor chips, waiting for the trigger. I've seen it. Anakin's voice was flat in a specific way, the flatness of someone pressing down on something that would otherwise rise. In a vision. The clones turning on the Jedi. I didn't know the name for it. I didn't know what to do with what I saw. The Council doesn't receive visions well when they come from me. What the Council receives well is not your primary operational concern, Revan said. What you do with accurate information is. Something moved across Anakin's face. Not offense, not quite. Recognition, maybe, the look of a man hearing a framework he has been constructing in private stated plainly by someone else. Who are you? He asked again. Not the same question as the doorway. Deeper, Revan considered what answer would be most useful. Someone who made every mistake you're currently positioned to make, he said, and survived them, and came back to make sure someone else doesn't have to. The training begins that night. Not combat. Anakin Skywalker does not need combat instruction, and Revan is not interested in teaching things that don't need teaching. What he needs is something more surgical, the specific correction of the philosophical wound that Palpatine has been carefully tending for a decade. They sit across from each other on the floor of the quarters with the window behind Anakin throwing Coruscant's glow across both of them in long amber lines, and Revan begins where the damage begins. Name what you're afraid of, he said. Not generally. Specifically, Anakin's expression closed immediately. It's not a Jedi exercise, Revan said. I'm not asking you to release it or let it go or surrender it to the Force or any of the other ways your order has of telling you that your emotional life is an inconvenience. I'm asking you to name it, because you can't work with something you won't look at directly. Name it. The closed expression held for a long moment. Then, quietly, losing her. The woman in the holograph. Not a question. Anakin didn't ask how he knew. Yes, and your fear is that you cannot protect her. My fear, Anakin said with a precision that suggested he had turned this over many times in private, is that everything I am is not enough to protect her. That the Force, that all of this, he opened his mechanical hand, a gesture that encompassed the lightsaber on his belt and the temple around them, and the war beyond the window, none of it is enough. That I will lose her anyway. And Palpatine has told you the dark side solves this. A muscle in Anakin's jaw moved. He's implied it. He lied, Revan said. Not because the dark side lacks power. It has power. Genuine power. And anyone who tells you otherwise hasn't used it. He lied because power over death doesn't exist. Not in the dark side. Not in any side. What he offered you was not a solution. It was a dependency. He would give you the hope of power over loss, which is not the same as power over loss, and that hope would require him to remain its source. You would serve him forever chasing something he was never going to give you. The silence this time was long and still. I know that, Anakin said finally. Quietly. Some part of me knows that. The part of you that knows that, Revan said, is the part we're going to train. He teaches him about fear, the way a surgeon teaches about infection, not as a moral failing to be excised, but as a biological process with predictable mechanics. Fear of loss is a response to the correct perception that things end. It is not wrong. It is not weakness. It is accurate information about the nature of existence. And accuracy is not the enemy. The enemy is what Palpatine taught him to do with it. Feed the fear. Let it grow. Let it become need. And then let the need become mine. Revan teaches him something different. Not the Jedi's solution, which is to open the hand and release, which is good philosophy and poor psychology for a man built the way Anakin Skywalker is built. Something older. Something he learned in the dark years between the Mandalorian Wars and his own fall, when he had not yet decided which kind of man he was going to be, and was trying on both. Name the fear. Hold it like a tool, not a wound. Use it for information. Do not let it use you. They work until the Coruscant night cycle dims the city glow outside the window. And when Anakin finally sleeps, it is the sleep of a man who has put something down rather than the sleep of a man who has been put down himself. Revan sits in the dark and watches the window and thinks about the next layer of the plan. And across the city, in the executive complex, the cold presence in the Force has not moved. But it is listening now. Revan is certain of it. He does not let that change anything. Vune smells like acid rain and old decisions. The atmosphere processes through the ship's environmental sensors as mildly corrosive, sulfuric compounds in the cloud layer, the legacy of whatever catastrophe scrubbed this planet's biosphere clean 2 centuries ago and left nothing behind but gray rock and the ruins of aristocratic ambition. Bast Castle sits on a cliff face above a dead valley, its towers the color of weathered bone, its architecture the specific kind of grandiose that powerful men build when they want their isolation to feel like a choice rather than a consequence. Count Dooku chose this place deliberately. Revan noted that. A man who wanted to feel like a monk who had renounced the world, when what he had actually done was trade one set of masters for another and convince himself the new arrangement was philosophy. He understands the psychology. He has lived adjacent to it. The ship descends through the cloud layer, and Anakin sits in the co-pilot's seat and says nothing, which is its own kind of discipline. 3 days ago, he would have filled the silence with questions. He is learning. The plan has 5 stages, and Revan has shared 3 of them. The first, land 2 kilometers from the castle perimeter, in a dead zone between sensor arrays that he identified from Vune's publicly available atmospheric survey data. Survey data collected by a Republic geological team 8 years ago, and never properly cross-referenced with the castle's security architecture. Because nobody in the Republic's intelligence apparatus had operational reason to think about Bast Castle's blind spots until now. The second, approach on foot, through the valley, using force concealment to suppress both their signatures below the threshold of the castle's passive detection systems. This requires sustained concentration from both of them simultaneously. And Revan spent the last leg of hyperspace transit drilling Anakin on the specific texture of the suppression technique, not hiding from the Force, but presenting a false surface to it, the way still water presents a reflection instead of a depth. The third, enter through the service infrastructure on the castle's western face, follow the internal power conduit network to the residential level, locate Dooku, and take him before he can signal Coruscant. And the fourth stage? Anakin had asked, in the transit. Depends on what Dooku does in Stage 3, Revan said. And the fifth? Depends on the fourth. Anakin had not found this satisfying. Revan had not adjusted the answer. The valley floor is loose shale and dead mineral deposits, and the kind of total silence that happens when nothing has lived somewhere long enough to build ambient noise. Their footsteps carry further than they should. Overhead, the cloud layer cycles through shades of gray that never reach white. The acid content of the air sits just below the threshold of immediate tissue damage, detectable. Unpleasant, non-lethal at short exposure. Revan moves through it without comment. Anakin falls into step 2 paces behind and to his left, the flanking position Revan established in their first training session, the geometry of it already becoming instinct. He learns body knowledge faster than almost anyone Revan has encountered across 2 eras of warfare. The potential in him is not theoretical. It is visible in motion, the way a well-engineered weapon is visible in the hand. The waste is what it would have become that clarifies into contempt again, and again Revan sets it aside. They reach the western face of the castle as the acid cloud layer thickens above them. The service infrastructure is exactly where the survey data placed it, a maintenance access point. Sealed with a lock that reads as high security by contemporary standards, and takes Revan approximately 40 seconds to cycle open using a force manipulation technique that treats the locking mechanism as a physical object to be rearranged rather than a code to be solved. The door opens inward. Dark corridor beyond. The smell of recycled air and old stone. They enter. The residential level is 4 floors up through service corridors that were designed for maintenance droids and have not been used by anything else in years. The castle's active security runs heavier on the exterior approaches and the main hall than on the interior, a common architectural bias, the assumption that anything that gets inside the perimeter belongs inside the perimeter. Revan has exploited this bias before. It does not become less exploitable for being common. They move through the corridor in silence, and the force concealment holds, a sustained, quiet pressure, like holding a breath without the physical component. Anakin maintains his half of it steadily. 3 days ago, in the first training session, sustaining it for 90 seconds had cost him visible effort. Now he carries it like something he has always known how to carry. His expression neutral, his attention divided exactly correctly between the technique and the physical space around them. The residential corridor on the 4th level opens into a long gallery with tall windows that look out over the dead valley, the acid cloud glow pressing gray light through the transparisteel in long flat bars across the stone floor. Revan stops at the gallery entrance, extends his awareness forward. Dooku is at the far end. Alone, seated, he is meditating, which is almost respectful, a man at least doing his darkness with discipline. His force presence is the deep, cold red of a Sith who came to the dark side through conviction rather than rage, which makes him, in Revan's assessment, simultaneously more principled and more dangerous than a passion-driven Sith would be. He believes what he is doing. That is harder to work with than ambition. Revan signals Anakin with 2 fingers. The geometry. Revan takes the left approach, Anakin takes the right, and they close the distance before Dooku has cause to break his meditation. They are halfway down the gallery when Dooku opens his eyes. He rises from the meditation chair in a single motion that carries no urgency and no surprise. The movement of a man who has already processed the threat and decided on his response before showing awareness of it. His lightsaber appears in his hand without apparent decision, the crimson blade igniting in the gray gallery light and painting everything in 2 colors, red and shadow. "Skywalker," Dooku said. His voice carries the specific register of a man who learned to use disappointment as a weapon and has been using it so long he may have forgotten it was ever a choice. Then his eyes move to Revan, and something shifts. Not fear, reassessment, and someone else. Revan stops walking. He does not ignite his lightsabers. "We're not here for a duel," he said. "Everyone who comes to Vune uninvited is here for a duel," Dooku replied. "The ones who say otherwise are usually the most dangerous. The crimson blade does not waver. His form is Makashi. Second form, the duelist's form, designed for precision and economy against a single opponent. Against two opponents at different angles, it has exploitable geometry. And Dooku knows this, and has already accounted for it. His weight already distributed to cover the wider threat radius. He is, Revan observes, genuinely excellent. "We're here because you have information," Revan said. "And because you are tired." A silence. The crimson blade hums. "Tired," Dooku repeated. "Of being useful to a man who does not intend to let you survive his victory." Revan lets the words sit without pressure. Not a manipulation. A diagnosis. You are a contingency to him. You have always been a contingency. The difference between you and Maul is methodology, not value. To Sidious, you are the same category of resource. Expendable on schedule. The blade does not drop. But the angle of Dooku's shoulders changes, fractionally. In the way a man's shoulders change when something lands where there was already a bruise. "You know his name," Dooku said quietly. "I know considerably more than his name." Anakin moves then. Not an attack, a positioning. Cutting off the gallery's far exit with a precise two-step that Dooku tracks immediately. The crimson blade swings a degree in that direction. Revan reaches out with the Force in the same instant and takes the lightsaber. Not a pull, a removal. Calm, total. The application of telekinetic control so complete and so sudden that the hilt simply leaves Dooku's hand as though it decided to, and arrives in Revan's without drama. Revan deactivates it. Sets it on the floor. Dooku looks at his empty hand. He looks at Revan. Whatever calculation runs behind those cold, precise eyes takes 4 seconds and arrives at a conclusion that is not surrender and not defiance, but something more pragmatic than either. "What?" Dooku said carefully. "Do you need from me?" "A confession," Revan said. "Documented, verified, and transmitted to every major holonet relay in the Republic simultaneously." He tilts his head a degree. "We'll record it here. You'll tell the truth about everything. Sidious, the Separatists, the war, the clone army, all of it. And in exchange, you live," Revan said, "which is more than he was ever going to give you." The acid rain begins outside the gallery windows, a soft, corrosive percussion against the transparent steel, the dead planet registering its indifference to the negotiation happening inside. Dooku straightens, clasps his hands behind his back, the posture of a man resuming dignity after it slipped. "Begin recording," he said. "Kamino exists in a state of permanent weather. The planet has no land, none visible, none mapped, none that matters to the civilization that built itself on stilted platforms above an endless ocean that has been restless since before the Republic charted it. The storm system that moves across the hemisphere they enter is not unusual. It is, by Kaminoan meteorological standards, moderate. The waves below the platform city of Tipica reach 40 meters in the troughs, and the wind drives horizontal rain against every exterior surface with the consistency of something that has forgotten how to stop. The ship locks into a private berth in the facility's secondary bay, a research contractor's docking allocation, arranged 3 days ago through a chain of intermediaries that traces back to a financial identity that does not exist. The Kaminoans are precise record keepers and exact bureaucrats, and they do not ask questions that fall outside their operational mandate, which is growing soldiers. Everything else is someone else's concern. Revan descends the ramp into the berth and immediately catalogs the structural layout of the bay against the facility schematics he memorized in transit. The match is exact. The Kaminoans build with the same obsessive dimensional fidelity that they bring to their genetic work, every corridor the same width, every junction at the same angle. The entire facility a single enormous argument for the proposition that precision is its own kind of beauty. He respects this, in the abstract. It also means the internal layout is entirely predictable. Anakin follows him off the ramp and pulls his hood up against the recycled bay air, which smells of salt and antiseptic and something organic beneath both that is better not examined closely. He looks around at the white walls and the clinical lighting, and the silence of a facility that is busy in ways that do not produce noise. The cloning labs are 3 levels down and 2 sections north, he said. Not a question. He has the schematics memorized too. We don't go near the labs, Revan said. What we need is in the medical infrastructure. Sub-Level 1. The facility runs continuous surgical maintenance cycles on clones at every stage of development: inhibitor chip installation, calibration, diagnostic review. The chips themselves are biological implants, not networked hardware. Each one is individual. Each one is physical. He moves toward the bay's internal access corridor, which means reaching them requires something other than a terminal. Anakin falls into step beside him. Then how? The same way I read the force current on the dead planet, Revan said. The same way I mapped Sidious through 40 years of concealment. The chips are organic tissue interfaced with synthetic material. They have a presence, faint but structured, the way any constructed thing embedded in a living system has a presence. The Rakata taught me that the line between organic and constructed is less absolute than most Force traditions maintain. He does not slow his pace. I can reach them. But it requires a sustained trance state. 40 minutes, perhaps more, of complete physical stillness while I work through every active clone in this facility individually. And the clones in the field? The facility runs surgical update sessions on a rotation, clones cycled back from the front for maintenance, recalibration, chip diagnostics. If I can reach the chips of every clone currently present in this facility and rewrite the activation architecture, those clones return to their units carrying the correction. It propagates through proximity and time rather than through a network. He pauses at the corridor junction, reads the signage in Kaminoan script, and turns left. It is slower than I would prefer. It is what the technology allows. Anakin is quiet for a moment. How many clones are in the facility right now? Enough, Revan said, to matter. Sub-Level 1 runs beneath the facility's main operational floor and exists in the Kaminoan's administrative taxonomy as a maintenance space. Not a place anyone goes, but a place that keeps everything above it functioning. The corridors down here are narrower than the main facility, the lighting amber rather than white, the ceiling low enough that the ventilation infrastructure is visible overhead in long parallel runs of conduit and cabling. They reach the sub-level access without encountering staff. The facility's personnel routing keeps technicians and researchers on the operational floors during active production cycles, which the current cycle is. The ambient sound above them is the constant low mechanical frequency of a facility producing soldiers at industrial scale, a sound Revan has been filtering since they boarded. The surgical maintenance hub is a room roughly 4 meters square, its walls occupied by medical monitoring architecture. Diagnostic systems in floor-to-ceiling racks, biological readout displays cycling through clone vital data in Kaminoan script. The room's center dominated by a reclined examination chair currently unoccupied, its restraint systems folded back in the open position. This is where chips are installed, calibrated, reviewed. This is where the biological interface between a living man and a dormant kill switch is closest to the surface. Revan crosses to the examination chair, does not use the monitoring terminals, sits in it, places both hands flat against the chair's armrests, closes his eyes, and begins. The technique is not describable in purely mechanical terms, because it does not operate in purely mechanical terms. What he does is extend his awareness into the biological field of the facility, the way he would extend it into any living system, feeling for the specific, faint structural signature of synthetic material embedded in organic tissue. The particular resonance of something constructed sitting inside something grown. The Rakatan scholars he studied across a decade of obsessive scholarship in another era entirely were the first to document this quality of presence, the way a crafted object, once interfaced with living tissue long enough, begins to carry the faint echo of the life around it. Not alive, but adjacent to alive, readable, if you know exactly what you are reading for. He finds the first chip in 40 seconds. It presents itself in his expanded awareness as a small, cold, precise thing, a structured absence inside the warm biological noise of the clone it lives in, a dormant voice waiting for a specific word that will make it speak. He maps it completely, finds the activation architecture at its center, a receiver, an execution pathway, a trigger sequence that requires only the correct signal to complete. The elegance of it is almost surgical. Whoever designed this understood both the biology and the malice required to hide one inside the other. He begins the rewrite. He works inward, not deleting the activation architecture, which would register as tampering to anyone who examined the chip directly, but altering what it does at the level below where a standard diagnostic looks. The receiver remains. The execution pathway remains. What he changes is the junction between them, a single point of biological interface, redirected, so that when the trigger signal arrives it will be received, processed, and dissipated before it reaches the layer that would translate it into action. The chip will hear the order. It will acknowledge it. It will do nothing. He moves to the next one. It is not fast work, and it is not clean work, and by the 20th chip the low structural fatigue that has lived in his bones since the dead planet is making itself known in ways that require active management. He does not surface. He does not adjust his breathing or shift his position or give the body any signal that might fragment the concentration the technique requires. He simply notes the fatigue, files it, and continues. 30, 40, 60, each one the same cold, precise, dormant thing, each one carrying the same architecture of betrayal, inside the same architecture of loyalty. The specific obscenity of a weapon built into the flesh of men who were never given the option of refusal. He has seen slavery before. He has seen it in forms that were more visible and forms that were less. This is among the less visible and the more complete. He files this also. The feeling is data, not a command. He does not let it slow him. Anakin stands at the room's entrance and watches the corridor, and does not let himself think about what is happening behind him. Because thinking about it will not help, and the list of things that will help is short, and all of them are physical. He hears the footsteps at 4 minutes before they arrive. 2 sets. Camino on gate. He knows it from the briefing data. The long-legged, unhurried stride of a species that evolved on a world with no need for urgency. They are moving along the main sublevel corridor on what reads as routine patrol. The rhythm of it is regular, undisturbed. No indication they have been alerted to anything. He pulls the hood further forward and steps back into the maintenance hub. Flattening himself against the interior wall beside the door. Reaches for the force concealment technique, Revan's voice in his memory, patient and precise. Present a surface, not a depth. Stillness reads as absence if you hold it exactly right. He holds it. The footsteps reach the junction outside the hub. Stop. Anakin does not breathe. Not as a technique, as a consequence of the concentration required to sustain the concealment, while his pulse does what his pulse is doing. A Kaminoan voice, outside the door, a short query in the facility's internal communication frequency, directed at what sounds like a monitoring station somewhere above. A pause. A response, inaudible from here. Another pause. The footsteps resume. They move past the hub door and continue down the corridor, and diminish and disappear into the ventilation system's ambient sound. Anakin breathes. He does not relax. Relaxing is for after. He returns to the door and watches the corridor and counts seconds the way Revan taught him to count them. Not with impatience, but with use. Each second a unit of information about what the environment is doing. At 43 minutes, Revan opens his eyes. He sits still for a moment in the examination chair, reassembling himself from the inside out, the specific cognitive process of withdrawing expanded awareness back into a body that has been waiting patiently for its occupant to return. The physical world reasserts itself in the correct order, temperature first, then sound, then the weight of his own limbs, then the full accounting of what the last 43 minutes have cost the bones. Considerable, he files this too. He stands. Done, he said. Anakin turns from the doorway. All of them? Every clone currently present in this facility. The activation architecture still exists in each chip. It will pass any diagnostic examination. But the junction between receiver and execution has been redirected. When the order is given, the chips will receive it and do nothing. Revan moves toward the door. The clones in the field will require time. as they rotate through maintenance cycles. As they return to facilities like this one across the Republic's cloning network, the correction can be applied. It is not simultaneous. It is not guaranteed to reach every clone before the order is given. A silence in which Anakin processes this. Then we have to move fast. We were always going to have to move fast, Revan said. This changes the margin, not the necessity. He steps into the amber corridor and does not slow. The financial operation begins tonight. If we remove Sidious's ability to give the order before the order is given, the question of how many chips have been corrected becomes academic. They move back through the amber-lit corridor toward the berth, and above them the facility continues its industrial rhythm, the vast, unhurried production of soldiers who will now, without knowing it, carry something different in the architecture of their obedience. Outside, the storm drives rain against every surface with the patience of something that has forgotten how to stop. Revan finds this, in a way he does not examine closely, appropriate. They have 20 hours before the next phase. He begins constructing it in the elevator. The plan's fourth layer is almost ready. The Republic's financial architecture is at its core a confidence mechanism, not a physical thing, not durasteel and power cells and hyperdrive motivators, not anything that can be held or weighed or destroyed with ordnance. It is an agreement, a collective galaxy-spanning consensus that certain numbers mean certain things, that certain institutions can be trusted to honor certain obligations, that the abstraction of credit has value, because enough beings across enough star systems have decided simultaneously to behave as though it does. Remove the confidence and the architecture does not weaken. It ceases. The numbers remain. The agreement ends. Revan understood this before he understood the Force. He sits in the ship's operations bay, parked now in the same level 1313 berth, dark and unlogged, with 3 datapads arranged in a precise arc in front of him, and a 4th in his hands, and he has been here for 6 hours building the instrument that will end Palpatine's financial existence before Palpatine knows it has begun. Anakin sits across from him and watches, and occasionally asks a question that is genuinely useful, which Revan has started to expect. "Walk me through it again," Anakin said. The Separatist financing network runs through 47 shell institutions across the outer rim, the mid-rim, and 3 technically neutral systems in the Tingle Arm, Revan said, without looking up from the datapad. Each institution holds a portion of the Separatist War Fund, material contracts, droid factory operational budgets, logistics accounts for Sith fleet resupply. None of them are registered to an entity that connects visibly to Dooku or to the Sith leadership. Most are registered to legitimate seeming commercial enterprises that have been operating for between 15 and 30 years. Long enough to look real, long enough to look inevitable. There is a difference. He sets down the 4th datapad and picks up the 1st. The accounts are real. The companies are real. The employees of those companies believe they work for freight brokers and resource extraction firms. The fiction is maintained at every visible layer. What is not real is where the money ultimately originates and where it ultimately goes. Sidious, through Dooku's confession we have the account identifiers, the routing keys, and the authorization credentials for the top-tier accounts in the network. The ones that Dooku himself used to move funds between the shell layer and the operational layer. Revan places the 1st datapad flat on the operations bay table. With those credentials, I can access the top-tier accounts. With access to the top-tier accounts, I can trace every downstream transaction for the past decade and reconstruct the complete network map. With the network map, I can do 2 things simultaneously. Anakin leans forward. Freeze the accounts, Revan confirms. And publish the map. A pause. Publishing the map means every financial institution in the Republic sees, simultaneously, that their correspondent banks have been processing Sith war funding for years. Every corporate entity that moved freight for a shell company sees its name in a document that also contains the words Separatist Financing and Count Dooku and Darth Sidious. Every neutral system that hosted a shell institution discovers, in public, that their financial neutrality was purchased by the Sith. He picks up the 2nd datapad. The freeze stops the war machine from functioning. The publication creates a crisis of institutional confidence that takes the entire support architecture with it. Anakin is quiet for a moment, and Palpatine can't stop it. He can try to suppress the publication. The HoloNet has centralized relay points, and the Senate has emergency powers over communications infrastructure. He will attempt to invoke them within minutes of the first broadcast. Revan allows himself something that is not quite satisfaction but is adjacent to it, which is why the broadcast does not go through a single relay point. It goes through all of them simultaneously, routed through 47 separate transmission nodes on a preset cascade that triggers from a single authentication packet. To stop it, he would need to shut down the entire Republic HoloNet within the window between the first transmission and the last. How long is the window? 11 seconds. Anakin looks at him. Something in his expression lands between admiration and the specific unease of a man confronting a mind that operates in a register he can respect but not fully follow. "You built a financial weapon," he said. "I built a truth delivery mechanism," Revan replied. "The financial consequences are what the truth does when it lands." He does not tell Anakin what the work actually costs. 6 hours of sustained, granular force-assisted analysis. Reading financial data streams the way he reads force currents. Treating the network architecture of 47 shell institutions as a single physical system to be mapped from the inside is not effortless. The body he is running on has been out of use for 4,000 years and has been in continuous high-demand operation for 11 days since the dead planet. The recalibration that felt almost complete after the vault is still ongoing in ways that manifest as a low structural fatigue that lives in the bones rather than the muscles and does not respond to rest the way muscle fatigue does. He is managing it. Managing it is not the same as not feeling it. He files this as information and continues. The network map takes 4 hours to reconstruct completely. It is, when finished, a document that covers 31 datapad screens in fine print, transaction records, account hierarchies, authorization chains, the entire decade-long financial history of a war that the Republic believed was a spontaneous political fracture, and that is, in this document, revealed as a managed investment portfolio. Revan reads through the complete map once, then again. He is looking for gaps, places where the architecture thins, where a legitimate transaction might be argued to be innocent, where a defense attorney with sufficient Senate connections might create enough ambiguity to muddy the picture. There are no gaps. Dooku was meticulous. Whatever his failures of judgment in the choice of masters, his record-keeping is precise, and precision is, here, a gift. Every transaction is dated, sourced, and authenticated. Every authorization carries a digital signature that traces to a unique credential. The chain of evidence is so clean it reads as designed to be discovered, which it was not. It was designed to be Dooku's private leverage over Sidious, the document that kept him alive as long as he was the only one who knew where it lived. He no longer needs that leverage. Revan attaches Dooku's confession recording to the financial map as a verification layer. The confession names the institutions. The map proves they exist exactly as named. The two documents together forming a structure that is not an argument. It is a demonstration. There is nothing to debate. There is only what is true. He encrypts the complete package with the 47-node cascade protocol and sets the authentication packet on a 12-hour delay. "When does it go?" Anakin asked. "Tomorrow, midday Senate session." Revan sets the datapad down. Maximum audience. Maximum simultaneous witnesses across as many systems as the HoloNet reaches. Palpatine will be in the chamber. He will watch it happen from his Chancellor's podium, and there will be nothing he can do except choose how to respond, which is the only choice we are leaving him. "He'll come for us." "Yes," Revan said. "He will." He looks at Anakin directly. That is the point. Anakin is quiet for a long time after this. The operations bay hums with the ship's low-power systems. Outside, 60 meters of Undercity press in on all sides. The noise and heat and electromagnetic density of 300 levels of civilization compacted into the dark below the dark. "You've planned for that too," Anakin said finally. What he does when his back is against a wall. "I've planned for every version of it I can construct from what I know of him," Revan said. A man who wins by waiting has never been forced to choose quickly. He will be competent under pressure. He did not survive 40 years of this by being fragile. But he will be choosing from a position where every option costs him something, which is a position he has never operated from before. That scares you. Revan considers this. The honesty of the question deserves the honesty of the answer. It makes me careful, he said. There is a version of this where I conquered a galaxy with an army that believed in me, and he waited in an office while millions died, and the difference between those two histories is that I have been the one who finishes the plan. He has always been the one who watches others finish his. He picks up the fourth datapad again. Tomorrow we find out what he does when the plan requires him to finish it himself. The 12-hour delay runs quietly in the background of the encrypted package. In the Republic Executive Complex, across the city, the cold presence in the Force sits in its office and holds its meetings and smiles at the people it intends to outlive. It does not know what is coming. That, Revan thinks, is the first genuine advantage he has had since waking up. He intends to use it completely. The Senate session begins at midday, as it always does. The rotunda fills the way it always fills, pod by pod, delegate by delegate, the vast circular chamber assembling itself into the specific organized chaos of a governing body that believes it governs. 10,000 beings from 1,000 systems, the full bureaucratic weight of a republic that has lasted for 1,000 years, settling into their positions with the comfortable certainty of an institution that has never seriously considered the possibility of its own end. Chancellor Palpatine takes the central podium at precisely 1200 hours, as he always does. His robes are correct. His expression is correct. The warm, measured authority he projects across the chamber is a performance so refined by decades of repetition that it has long since ceased to feel like performance even to the performer. It is simply what his face does, what his voice does, what his presence does. In this room, at this hour, on this day, he opens the session with a prepared statement on the progress of the war. He does not finish it. The first sign is not the broadcast. The first sign is what happens in the Force. Palpatine feels it between one word and the next, a change in the chamber's ambient Force texture so specific and so sudden that his prepared sentence simply stops in his throat like a door closing. Not a disturbance. A weight. The specific gravitational quality of something true, landing in a large number of minds simultaneously, the Force registering mass belief shift the way a geologist's instrument registers a fault moving. He does not show this on his face. He looks down at his prepared remarks, and his eyes continue moving across the text, and he continues speaking. And the part of his mind that has been running contingency calculations since before most of the beings in this chamber were born begins running them faster. Behind him, on the chamber's primary display system, the enormous holographic array that the Senate uses for evidence presentations, official communications, and emergency broadcasts, something appears that he did not authorize. He hears the chamber change before he turns to look at it. The document is not dramatic in its presentation. That is the first thing that registers, not to Palpatine, who is already 3 steps past the surface of it, but to the 10,000 delegates watching it assemble itself across the display system in clean, precise lines of financial data and transaction records and account identifiers. It does not announce itself with music or narration or the graphic design of propaganda. It is simply a document. A very large, very detailed, very specific document, appearing on every screen in the Senate rotunda simultaneously. And then, Dooku's voice begins. The recording quality is clear. The voice is unmistakable, the precise, aristocratic diction of a man who learned to speak as a weapon and never stopped. It names institutions. It names accounts. It names dates and transaction amounts and the authorization credentials that connect each transaction to the next in a chain whose terminal point is the same in every case. Darth Sidious. Chancellor Palpatine. The same man. The chamber does not erupt immediately. There is a collective inhale, the sound of 10,000 beings encountering a piece of information so structurally destabilizing that the first response is not noise but the opposite of noise, the silence of minds making an emergency adjustment to everything they thought they knew. Then it erupts. Palpatine turns from the podium. His face, in this moment, does something it has not done in public in 40 years, it thinks. Not the performed consideration of a statesman weighing options, but the visible, unguarded processing of a mind that has encountered a problem it did not build a solution for, and knows it, and is building one now in real time with insufficient materials. It lasts for 1.4 seconds. Then the mask is back. But 1.4 seconds in the Senate rotunda, with 10,000 witnesses and rolling HoloNet coverage, is not nothing. It is, in fact, everything. Revan planned for exactly 1.4 seconds. Because a man who has never been cornered will not be able to prevent his face from showing the experience of being cornered for at least that long, and 4 seconds of Sheev Palpatine's unguarded face is a confession as complete as any document. The HoloNet capture of those 1.4 seconds will be played, in the weeks that follow, more times than any other footage in Republic broadcast history. He does not know this yet. He is already moving. The first decision takes him 4 seconds, not denial. Denial is for audiences that haven't seen the evidence. Every being in this chamber is looking at the evidence right now on 14 independent display systems that he does not control and cannot shut down without physically destroying the rotunda's infrastructure, which is not an option he can exercise from a podium. The first decision is accelerate. He reaches for the Senate's emergency communications override, a legitimate chancellor's power, exercised twice in the past decade for genuine crisis management, and invokes it. The legal mechanism is sound. The intention behind it is not. He begins issuing orders through the override channel, clone units to the rotunda, the temple, the broadcast relay stations. Order 66 activation sequence, coded and ready 40 years of patience cashing out in a single command. The command goes out. He waits for the confirmation that the Jedi are dying. The confirmation does not come. This is the moment that is different from every model he has run. In 40 years of contingency planning, Palpatine has built responses for every failure mode he could construct. Political exposure, manage the narrative, discredit the source, deploy loyalists, military betrayal, the clone army is the failsafe, the Jedi are the threat. Order 66 solves both simultaneously. Physical attack, his combat ability is, he has always known, the final argument that nothing political can match. He has never built a response for, what if Order 66 doesn't work? The clone units move to their positions. They take up formation. They point weapons at the correct targets. And then they stand there, and the weapons do not fire, and the Jedi do not die, and the failsafe that was supposed to make every other failure mode irrelevant simply does not execute. In the Force, Palpatine feels something he has not felt in so long the sensation has no recent reference point. His plan ends. Not damaged, not compromised. Ended. The specific structural finality of a mechanism that has been altered at the level below where he was looking, so completely and so cleanly that there is no version of the next 10 minutes in which the plan continues to function. He stands on the podium of the Republic Senate, with 10,000 witnesses and a galaxy's worth of HoloNet coverage, and a clone army that will not obey him. And for 0.8 seconds, shorter than the first moment, better controlled, but still visible to anyone watching closely enough, Sheev Palpatine is afraid. He makes his second decision. It is the decision of a man who has run out of architecture and is operating on instinct, and his instincts are genuinely, dangerously good, which is the variable that Revan has been planning around since Vyun. He drops the mask. All of it. The warmth, the authority, the measured statesman's register. Gone. Completely, in a single breath. Like a costume removed rather than a persona abandoned. What is underneath is not a surprise to anyone who has read the document on the display system, but seeing it replace the familiar face of the Chancellor in real time, in the Senate rotunda, with 10,000 pairs of eyes on it, is a different order of experience than reading about it. The being that stands on the podium is old in a way that has nothing to do with years. Its eyes are the color of consequence. Its presence in the Force expands outward, like a pressure front, the concealment technique dissolving not gradually, but all at once. 40 years of careful layering coming down in a single deliberate act, and what is underneath is vast and cold and genuinely, Not performatively, dangerous. The chamber's eruption changes register, from outrage and confusion into something more primitive. Fear. If it is exposure you wanted, Sidious said, and his voice in the rotunda's acoustics is not the Chancellor's warm authority, but something that carries in the bones rather than the ears, then you have it. Come out of your shadows. Both of you. His yellow eyes move to the rotunda's eastern entrance with a precision that is not a guess. He has known. Revan understands that they are here. He has known for at least an hour. The eastern entrance opens. Revan walks through it, Anakin one step to his left, and the Senate rotunda goes quieter than it has any right to go. 10,000 beings, holding 10,000 breaths. The display system still cycling through Dooku's confession behind the figure on the podium, the evidence outliving its subject's patience. Revan stops 30 meters from the podium. You waited in an office, he said while a galaxy bled. I stood in every battle I ever asked men to die in. He tilts his head a degree, the same clinical angle as Vune, as the temple corridor, as every moment of assessment in 11 days of forward motion. Let us find out what that difference means. Sidious reaches into his robes. The lightsaber that appears is a single blade, crimson, igniting with the clean, controlled snap of a weapon that has been maintained with the same obsessive precision as every other instrument its owner has used across 40 years of patient, hidden work. There is no theater in the way he holds it, no performance of menace. He carries it the way a craftsman carries a tool he has used so long it has become an extension of thought rather than an act of will. The lightning begins. It arrives as a wall, not a bolt, not the precise, targeted application of a duelist managing his power output. A statement. Every joule Sidious can generate in a single sustained release, thrown across 30 meters of Senate rotunda floor, with the specific abandon of a man who has decided that witnesses are no longer a liability. 10,000 delegates are still in their pods. The HoloNet is still broadcasting. He knows both of these things, and the lightning comes anyway, which tells Revan everything he needed confirmed about what the next 10 minutes will require. He raises his right hand. The Tudamini's technique is not a shield in the architectural sense. It does not create a barrier that the lightning strikes against. It is an absorption, a channeling, the force equivalent of a circuit that accepts current and routes it somewhere it can do no harm. He learned it from a Jedi master he respected, and then broke with. In an era so far removed from this chamber that the historical record of it exists only in ruins and in him, he has not used it at full draw in 4,000 years. The lightning hits his palm and disappears. Not dramatically. Not with counterflash or visible dispersal. It simply contacts his hand and ceases to exist as a weapon. Drawn through his body and down through his feet into the rotunda's stone floor, where it dissipates into the structural durasteel as heat. He stands in the full force of it without moving his feet, his robe pressed back by the concussive force of the release, but his stance unchanged. And the only evidence of the effort involved is the deliberate, controlled nature of his breathing. 30 meters away, Sidious stops. The pause lasts 2 seconds. In those 2 seconds, Revan watches Sidious process the information, watches the yellow eyes move across his stance, his hand, the absence of any counterweapon. The fact that 30 meters of lightning produced no result visible to the 10,000 witnesses still, somehow, in their pods. The processing is fast. It is, he notes, genuinely fast, faster than most Apex-level combatants he has engaged. The mind behind the face running threat assessment at a speed that explains how a man with this much contempt for open conflict has survived this long. Sidious was never just a bureaucrat. He was always also this. You absorbed that, Sidious said. Not surprise. Categorization, I absorbed that, Revan confirmed. Tudamini's, old technique. The yellow eyes narrow by a fraction. You are considerably older than you appear. I am considerably older than anything in this room, Revan said. Including the room. To his left, Anakin has not moved. Positioned in the geometry they established 3 days ago in the quarters, the flanking angle that Revan identified as the correct approach for this specific confrontation, based on Sidious's documented combat preferences and the rotunda's architecture. He is still. The specific quality of his stillness is different from the stillness of a man controlling fear. It is the stillness of a man who has named his fear and set it down and is now simply present, fully, in the room as it is. Revan notices this and files it as confirmation. Sidious moves. Not toward Revan. Laterally, a force-assisted burst of speed that covers 12 meters in under a second, closing the angle on Anakin. The tactical logic sound. The older threat has demonstrated a specific counter to his primary weapon, so remove the secondary threat first and restore numerical advantage. It is the correct decision given incomplete information about what Anakin has become in 11 days. Anakin ignites his lightsaber. Blue-white in the rotunda's light, clean and even. He settles into a stance that is not purely gem-so, but something synthesized. The physical vocabulary of a combatant who has spent 3 days being taught to fight for clarity rather than victory, which is a different thing. Sidious brings his crimson blade forward in the opening movement of a form Revan recognizes as Juyo, 7th form, Fury form. Designed to overwhelm a single opponent through relentless offensive pressure that escalates faster than it can be countered. In a straight duel it is devastating. Against a man who has been taught not to react to pressure but to observe it, it has a different yield entirely. Anakin does not try to match the pressure. He accepts the first exchange, deflects cleanly, yields ground without yielding position, and watches. The second exchange. Sidious is faster than any organic combatant at this age has a right to be, the dark side feeding his physical capability well past its biological ceiling, every strike carrying the specific weight of power that has no governor on it. Anakin takes a graze across the left forearm, the crimson blade leaving a burn line through the fabric of his robe. He does not react to it. He steps back, resets his stance, and watches again. He's drawing your attention, Revan said from across the rotunda, his voice carrying cleanly through the chamber's acoustics without effort. He wants you reacting. Stop reacting. Sidious turns from Anakin for 4 seconds. Not a mistake. A choice. The choice of a man who wants Revan to know he is not threatened by commentary, and in those 0.4 seconds something changes in the rotunda that has nothing to do with the combatants on the floor. The display system, which has been cycling through Dooku's confession and the financial map since the broadcast began, adds a new layer. Revan triggers it from the authentication packet in his armor's integrated transmitter, the final cascade in the 47-node broadcast sequence. The piece he did not explain to Anakin, because explaining it would have changed how Anakin fought this opening phase. And the opening phase needed to be genuine. What appears on the rotunda's display system now is not financial data. It is a full HoloNet transmission, live, multi-channel, simultaneously broadcasting on every active frequency the Republic communication infrastructure supports. Not just the rotunda. Coruscant, the core worlds. The mid-rim. The outer rim relay stations. Every system with a HoloNet receiver. The clone armies in the field. The Separatist command ships. The neutral systems in the Tingle Arm. Every being in the galaxy with a receiver is watching the Senate Rotunda right now. The duel. Sidious, the lightning that hit Revan's palm and ceased to exist. The crimson blade and the blue-white blade, and the yellow eyes of a man who wore a kind face for 40 years, visible now in every detail in the rotunda's lighting. Recognizable against the face of the Chancellor that has appeared on every HoloNet news broadcast for the past 14 years. There is no gap between what the document claims and what the broadcast shows. The document said this man is a Sith Lord. The broadcast is showing a Sith Lord. The distance between allegation and evidence is 0. In the pods around the rotunda floor, 10,000 delegates watch the display system and watch the floor simultaneously, and the Force registers the mass shift of it. 10,000 certainties restructuring themselves in real time, the specific seismic quality of an institutional consensus breaking apart. Revan walks forward. Sidious feels the broadcast before he sees it, feels it in the Force, the way the chamber's collective presence shifts from fear into something more complex, something that has resolution in it, and turns to look at the display system for 1.1 seconds. Those 1.1 seconds are not a mistake. He is past the point of mistakes mattering. They are grief. Briefly, the specific, compressed grief of a man watching something he built with 40 years of patience become the instrument of its own dismantling. The plan was always the plan. The war, the emergency powers, the slow-managed collapse of the Republic into something he could reshape in the image of order as he defined order. It was the finest thing he ever made. It is ending on the display system of the chamber where it was supposed to culminate. His face closes. "Clever," he said, addressing Revan across the rotunda floor, over Anakin's head, the word precise and without warmth. "You understand that this changes nothing about the next 30 seconds. It changes everything about the 30 years after them," Revan replied. He stops 20 meters away. "The galaxy is watching you, not reading about you. Watching, there is no version of the next 30 seconds in which you walk out of this room and resume any form of the plan." "The plan," Sidious said, "has always had a final contingency." He raises his lightsaber and the force around him inverts. Not a technique, but a total commitment. The dark side fed by everything he has ever been, and everything he has ever done, and the specific, cold fury of a man who has decided that if this ends here, it ends as loudly as possible. He comes across the rotunda floor, and he is genuinely, terrifyingly fast. Revan meets him. His two blades ignite simultaneously, purple-white even, clean. And the first exchange covers 4 meters of rotunda floor in under a second, the contact points between the blades sending light across the chamber in every direction, the acoustics of the space turning each impact into something that the 10,000 witnesses feel in their chests, rather than just their ears. Sidious is stronger than Revan expected. He notes this without alarm. He is also, underneath the power and the speed and the 40 years of dark side cultivation, afraid. Revan can feel it in every strike, the specific texture of a combatant fighting to prevent an outcome, rather than achieve one. Defense dressed as aggression, a man trying to stop something rather than build something, which is a different quality of force entirely. And it is the difference Revan has been planning around since the Dead Planet. He conquered a galaxy with men who believed they were building something. Sidious built nothing. He only waited. Revan presses forward, and the gap closes, and behind him on every display system in the rotunda, and on every receiver in the galaxy, the broadcast continues. Patient and complete. The truth requiring no defender now. It is already everywhere. It cannot be recalled. Sidious fights the way fear fights. Not the obvious fear, not flinching, not retreat, not the visible degradation of a combatant who knows he is losing. The subtler kind. The fear that has been alchemized over decades into something that wears the face of total commitment. That drives a combatant forward rather than backward, that makes every strike carry the specific weight of a man trying to prevent the future rather than secure it. Revan has felt this quality before. He has fought men in this register across 2 eras of warfare. They always tire before he does. The rotunda floor has become geography. In the first 40 seconds of sustained engagement, the three of them, Revan pressing forward, Sidious holding the center, Anakin at the flanking angle, his role not to engage but to exist at the edge of Sidious's threat calculation and cost him the fraction of attention that fraction requires, have covered 30 meters of open floor and destroyed 2 delegate pods. Their support struts sheared clean by errant blade contact, the pods themselves swinging empty on their tethers, the remaining delegates who have not evacuated, and there are still thousands, frozen in position by the specific paralysis of witnessing something too large to immediately process, watch from their pods in total silence. The HoloNet watches with them. Sidious breaks contact at the 43-second mark, a full disengage, 3 meters of distance created by a force push that would have put a lesser opponent through a structural wall. Revan takes the push in full, steps back once, stops. His feet do not leave the floor. Sidious looks at this. His chest is moving with the effort of the last 40 seconds. Revan's is not. And this information lands in Sidious's yellow eyes as the tactical data it is. "You are a relic," Sidious said. The voice has lost the chamber-filling resonance of his opening declaration. It is pitched now for the two of them. The intimate register of a man trying to find an angle in words, because he is reassessing the angles available in the physical space. Whatever you were in your era is not what this moment requires. You don't belong here. I belong wherever I choose to stand, Revan said. You built a career on ensuring no one else had that freedom. I built an order. The yellow eyes are moving, tracking Anakin in the periphery, tracking Revan's blade positions, tracking the rotunda's remaining exit points in the layered way a mind does when it is building options it hasn't committed to yet. A correction. The Republic was dying on its own, slowly, bureaucratically, without drama. I accelerated the process and proposed to rebuild what came after. That is not cowardice. You proposed to rebuild it in your image, Revan said, which required everyone currently living in it to either serve you or die. I have heard this argument from better minds than yours. It did not survive scrutiny then either. The distance between them is 19 meters. Revan watches Sidious calculate it. You conquered a galaxy. Sidious said, Don't perform virtue at me. You made the same choices I made. I made them on a battlefield, Revan replied, standing in front of the men I was asking to die. Not in an office. Not behind a face that belonged to someone else. He moves one step forward. Deliberate, unhurried. The step of a man who has decided the conversation has given him what he needed from it. I know what you are afraid of. It is not me. It is not him. A fractional tilt toward Anakin. It is that the plan was always the only thing. Without it you are simply a very old, very frightened man who has mistaken patience for strength. Sidious raises his lightsaber. He comes with everything. There is no strategy in it. Not in the way the first phase of the engagement had strategy, the tactical mind-managing output, preserving options, looking for the opening that force alone might not provide. What comes now is total, the full draw of a dark side that has been fed for 80 years on fear and secrecy, and the specific fuel of a man who has always believed, at the foundation of everything, that he was the only being in the galaxy who truly understood its nature. The lightning comes first. Not a wall this time, but a sustained stream, held and directed with both hands while the crimson blade hangs at his side. The full output of it focused on Revan alone. It hits the same palm, the same Tutamini's circuit, and disappears into the floor again. Then Sidious reclaims the blade, and is inside his guard. This is the thing Revan has been accounting for since the engagement began. Genuine speed, genuine power, genuine technical precision. Juyo dissolved now into something that has no form name. Because it is not a form, it is a man with one lightsaber and no remaining reasons for restraint, and the difference between fighting a Sith Lord with reasons for restraint and one without them is measurable. The first exchange inside the guard costs Revan a step. The second costs him 2. The third, Anakin moves. Not a charge. Exactly what Revan taught him. Exactly as Revan taught it. The measured, angled approach that treats the engagement as a problem to be solved rather than an enemy to be overwhelmed. He does not try to take Sidious's attention. He does not announce himself. He closes the flanking angle at the precise geometry they established, the approach that Sidious's current stance and current focus create a blind zone for, and by the time the yellow eyes have registered the repositioning, the calculation has already run. Sidious cannot fully cover both of them at this distance. He chooses Revan. The correct choice. Revan is the larger threat, the demonstrated counter to his primary weapon, the unknown quantity that has cost him more in 9 minutes than any opponent in 4 decades. He drives at Revan with 3 consecutive strikes of total commitment, each one designed to end the engagement, each one met and redirected at angles that cost Revan effort he does not display. On the third strike, Revan does not redirect. He stops it. Full arrest. Both blades crossed. The crimson caught in a lock that is not technique but will. 4,000 years of will applied to a single point of contact, holding while every muscle in his rebuilt, recalibrated body protests the demand. He holds for 1.3 seconds. That is enough. Anakin's strike comes from the right, clean, precise, without rage. His blade finds the gap in Sidious's guard that the locked position creates. the specific opening that Revan's whole body is currently dedicated to holding available, and his face in this moment is not the face of a man in the grip of anger or grief, or the desperate reaching for power that Palpatine spent a decade cultivating in him. It is the face of a man making a decision he has examined and accepted. Calm, certain, the blade connects. Sidious falls in pieces, not physically, but in the Force, the way a structure falls when its central load-bearing element fails. The dark side presence that expanded outward in the rotunda when the mask came down contracts suddenly, completely, a pressure front reversing. And what is left is the absence of something very large rather than the presence of something small. The crimson blade dies in the same second. The sound of it going out is the loudest thing in the room. Revan steps back, deactivates his blades, stands in the silence that follows and breathes through the full inventory of what the last 9 minutes have cost his body. Conducting the assessment without drama, because drama is not useful and the assessment is. He is functional. Everything that needs to be working is working. He looks at Anakin. Anakin stands with his blade still ignited, looking at the floor of the rotunda, his breathing controlled in the specific way of a man who is deliberately managing the re-entry. He is not shaking. Revan notes this as significant. He deactivates the blade after 4 seconds. Not immediately, but after 4 seconds. Which is the time required to be certain the decision was made rather than defaulted to. He looks up. "Is it done?" he asked. "It is done," Revan said. The rotunda is not silent anymore. It is becoming something. The sound of 10,000 beings beginning to process what they just watched. The specific rising frequency of a large space filling back up with human and non-human voices that have been held in suspension for 9 minutes and are now releasing simultaneously. In the delegate pods, beings are standing. Some are moving toward exits. Some are simply standing, looking at the rotunda floor, at the display system still cycling Dooku's confession, and the financial map and the broadcast footage of the last 9 minutes, at the figure on the floor that used to be the Chancellor of the Republic. Revan does not look at the pods. He looks at the display system. Dooku's voice, still running in the background of the broadcast, names an account number in the Tingle arm. The evidence outlives its subject. He finds this, as he found the Kaminoan storm, appropriate. The plan's final layer is complete. What remains is not a layer. What remains is the world the plan has made. The galaxy that woke up this morning with a manufactured war, and a hidden Sith, and a clone army waiting to execute its Jedi, and will go to sleep tonight without any of the three. He turns toward the eastern entrance. There is one conversation left. It is the one he has been, in the spaces between every other layer of the plan, quietly dreading. The war ends on a Tuesday. Not with a treaty signing or a final battle, or the kind of ceremonial conclusion that historians can point to and call a moment. It ends the way a fire ends when you remove what feeds it. Not dramatically, but completely. Within 6 hours of the broadcast, the Separatist financing network's accounts are frozen across 47 institutions simultaneously. The Cascade Protocol completing its work with the same unhurried precision Revan built into it. Without operational funding, the Sith fleet resupply chains collapse. Without resupply, the battle groups in the field begin standing down, not out of conviction, but out of the more fundamental logic of ships that cannot refuel, and droids that cannot be replaced, and a command structure whose hidden center has ceased to exist. The HoloNet carries it all. Every system with a receiver watches the Confederacy of Independent Systems discover, in real time, that the cause it believed in was a financial instrument owned by a dead man. By the following morning, the Clone Wars are over. There is no celebration on Coruscant. There is something quieter and more complicated. The specific emotional register of a population that has just learned the war it grieved through, and paid for, and sent its children to die in, was engineered, and is now processing what that means about everything it believed while it was happening. The city burns with light as it always burns, but the frequency of it feels different. More uncertain. Less automatic. Revan watches it from the temple's upper terrace in the early morning, and finds the uncertainty healthy. The council summons him that same morning. He goes. Not because the summons carries authority he recognizes, it does not, but because the conversation is necessary and he prefers to have necessary conversations in the correct setting rather than in corridors or on terms that feel evasive. He walks through the temple's upper levels in his armor and his mask, and every Jedi he passes stops moving and watches him go by. And he does not adjust his pace for any of them. The council chamber is gold with early light, the 5 spires of the temple throwing long shadows across Coruscant's skyline. 12 seats in a circle, 11 of them occupied. The 12th, the seat nearest the eastern window, the one most recently offered to Anakin when the council reluctantly granted him observer status. A seat that never properly fit the arrangement, and that everyone in this room knew it, is empty. Anakin is not here. Revan noted this before he entered the room. Mace Windu speaks first. This is not a surprise. What you did, Windu said, cannot be categorized as anything the Order sanctions. The methods, the secrecy, the unauthorized involvement of a Jedi Knight in operations conducted entirely outside Council oversight, produced the outcome your Order has failed to produce in 14 years, Revan said. He stands in the center of the circle, does not sit. I am not asking for your sanction. I am informing you that it is done. You acted unilaterally. You involved a Jedi Knight in unauthorized operations. You used techniques of uncertain origin on Republic military personnel. I removed a kill switch from the flesh of 32 million soldiers, Revan said. The moral accounting on that is straightforward. He looks around the circle, 12 faces in various configurations of gratitude, unease, and the specific institutional discomfort of people whose authority has been demonstrated as insufficient by someone who does not need it. I understand what this order is. I understand what it was built to be. I have studied your history from the outside, which gives me a perspective you do not have on yourselves. He lets that sit for 2 seconds. You have confused stillness with wisdom. You have confused institutional continuity with rightness. You have had a Sith Lord operating in this city for 14 years, and your primary response to his influence on the most Force-sensitive being alive was to counsel him to feel less. The chamber is quiet. Yoda, in his seat, has his eyes closed. His expression is not defensive. It is the expression of a being absorbing something that costs him something to absorb, which is different, and Revan respects the difference. Wrong. We were, Yoda said quietly. In many things. Acknowledge this. I do. I know, Revan said. That is why I am still talking rather than leaving. Windu stands. The movement has intention in it, not aggression, but the physical vocabulary of a man who has decided that words have reached their limit. He is, Revan notes, genuinely formidable. The Force presence behind him is the specific quality of a combatant who has nothing to prove and knows it, which makes him more dangerous than one who does. You don't speak for this order, Windu said. You don't have standing here. Whatever you were in your time, Revan raises his left hand. The Force moves through the chamber in a single, quiet, total expression, not a strike, not a threat, but a demonstration, the same category of communication as the Vune disarmament. Here is what exists behind the conversation, so the conversation can be accurate about what it is. Every being in the 12 seats is pressed back into it simultaneously, a firm and complete and entirely non-lethal insistence, held for 3 seconds and then released. Nobody falls. Nobody is hurt. Everyone understands. Revan lowers his hand. The galaxy no longer has room, he said, for an order that polices power it refuses to fully understand. You are not wrong to exist. You are not wrong to teach. You are wrong to believe that wisdom handed down unchanged across 1,000 generations is still wisdom rather than habit. He looks at Yoda last, because Yoda is the one in this room who might actually hear it. Evolve. The Force is not your institution's property. It never was. He turns and walks toward the door. Anakin is in the corridor outside. He is leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, and his mechanical hand resting against his left forearm in the way it always does. And his expression when Revan emerges is the expression of a man who has been waiting to say something and is now deciding how to say it. I'm leaving the Order, he said. I know, Revan said. I'm going to Padam. We're going to. I don't know exactly what we're going to do. Figure out what comes next. He pauses, without someone else defining what that has to look like. That is the correct decision, Revan said. Anakin looks at him. You're not going to tell me the Jedi need me, or that I have a responsibility to. No. A silence in which Anakin recalibrates for the absence of the argument he prepared for. Okay, he said. Then, more quietly, thank you. For all of it. The training, Camino, he stops, starts again. I was going somewhere very dark. I think you know how far. I know exactly how far, Revan said. I went further. And you came back. And I came back. He reaches up and removes his mask. The face underneath is not remarkable. It is the face of a man in his middle years, marked by the specific kind of weariness that does not come from age but from duration, from having carried something very heavy for a very long time across a very large distance. It is not a face that asks for anything. He holds the mask out. Anakin looks at it. I can't take that. It is an object. Revan said. What it represents is not transferable. But the reminder is. He waits. You will have moments, in whatever comes next, when fear tries to resume its previous position. When it does, remember that you have already named it. You have already set it down once. You can set it down again. He moves the mask slightly forward. Keep this as the record that you were not what he tried to make you. Anakin takes it. He holds it for a moment looking at it, and something in his face settles, the last residue of the tension that has lived behind his eyes since the night Revan knocked on his door, releasing quietly, like a breath let out after very long holding. Where will you go? He asked. The unknown regions, Revan said. There are things out there that this galaxy is not ready for. Things that were old when I was young, that I left unfinished. He looks past Anakin's shoulder at the temple corridor, the ancient stone, the 10,000-year hum of an institution trying, in the chamber behind him, to begin the work of becoming something better. Someone should go and look. Alone? I have always worked best alone, Revan said. And I have never needed a reason to leave. That came from someone else. The hangar bay is quiet in the early light. His ship sits where he left it. Dark, unmarked. The maintenance intelligence cycling patiently through its pre-flight sequence at a signal from his transmitter. He boards without ceremony, the same way he boarded on the dead planet 11 days and 1 war ago. He does not look back at the temple. The ship rises through Coruscant's upper atmosphere, and the city falls away below, the planet-sized agreement, the trillion burning certainties, the galaxy's center of gravity dressed in metal and light. From above, it is beautiful in the way that complicated things are beautiful, not despite their contradictions, but because of them. Each competing impulse still somehow producing a whole that continues to function. He plots the course for the unknown regions himself. The nav computer accepts the coordinates without objection. The hyperspace jump takes 3 seconds to calculate, and lasts forever in the instant before it resolves. In the viewport, Coruscant's light stretches and folds and disappears. Revan sets his hands on the console and faces forward. He conquered nothing here. He prevented something. He gave a galaxy that was destroying itself on schedule a different option, and then declined to stay and manage what it did with the choice, because management was never what was needed. What was needed was a single, precise intervention from someone who had already made every available mistake and survived them. He has done that. What remains is the next unfinished thing, in the dark past the edge of the charts, waiting with the patience of something very old. He goes to meet it without hesitation, and without fear, and the stars receive him back into their silence, like something that was always supposed to return. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.